Welcome to LoyalTV, and welcome to Wagner, Oklahoma. Located on the western edge of the Ozarks, this picturesque settlement is named after Henry Bigfoot Wagner, a nickname that referred to his substantial shoe size, and possibly the significant role he played in the construction of a critical railroad switch in 1893. Upon completion, it became a profitable stop for locals, allowing them to load lumber and cattle more easily. This new rail destination became known as the Wagner Switch, and soon after, simply Wagner. But truth is, Henry Wagner's big footprints were far from the first to make an impression on the Wagner County countryside. Our story travels just a few miles east of the city, to the site of Taylor Ferry Island, a spot with a long, rich history all its own. Before the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock, long before the Oklahoma land rush of 1889, indigenous people had already constructed vast societies in Midwestern America. A prehistoric development in the Wagner area was called the Norman site, named for the family of Lewis Norman, who had settled the land as their Cherokee allotment, and who years later would lose the property to create Fort Gibson Lake. The Norman site was built by ancestors of the modern-day Caddoan nation, starting as far back as 1200 AD, and it was highlighted by so-called midden mounds, in this case 3 large peaks and several smaller hills. But what's under these earthen mounds is what excites archaeologists and historians. Middens throughout the Midwest hide treasures such as ancient pottery, stone and metal tools, plus arrowheads. This buried environment allows outstanding preservation of organic materials too, like wood, basketry, and food remains. Simply put, it's a clear view into the culture and behavior of our past. Even more revealing, there can be remnants of ritual monuments and burial houses under the mounds, with artifacts that indicate status, wealth, and identity. These structures would be built, celebrated, then eventually burned. Then another mound was created over the top, forming layer upon layer, year after year. The ever-growing swells became settings where community leaders would gather to address villagers, and in turn, symbols of communities growing and families settling in. Basically, it was an extraordinary opportunity to mine and reconstruct an ancient society. So excavation of the Norman site began in the 1930s through the Works Progress Administration, though regrettably, it was soon brought to a halt for lack of funding. Then, a decade later, after the Great Depression, a different type of excavation began in Wagner County, one to expand Fort Gibson Lake as a public works project, construction that was proceeding right alongside these 3 huge mounds and the numerous smaller hills. Fearing the loss of what could be a complete ancient community submerged underwater, Dr. Robert Bell, a professor of anthropology at the University of Oklahoma, gathered a group to excavate the site before the Fort Gibson Lake was inundated. Unfortunately, Bell and his team got a sinking feeling when they arrived on a hot July day in 1948. All of the mounds, except for the largest, had been cleared, bulldozed. Unearthed dirt had been used as fill in construction of a dike for the new Grand River Bridge. Still, Bell's crew managed to recover some artifacts, which are now displayed in several museums across the state. Today, only the topmost portion of that largest mound is visible, appearing as a small island just east of Wagner, just off the Taylor Ferry Beach and just to the north of Oklahoma Highway 51. And while much of a prehistoric culture sits at the bottom of Fort Gibson Lake, this tiny Taylor Ferry Island still breaks the surface of the water, standing as proof that Oklahoma was settled long before a rush to do so. Join us again next week on LoyalTV for more of the best Oklahoma stories you've never heard.